Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to episode 164 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions. Today I have back my good friend John Champion. John is one half of the podcasting group at missionlogpodcast.com where they talk about all things Star Trek. He and his partner Ken Ray are on TNG, The Next Generation. They're into their second season, and we review some of the leadership lessons that came about from season 1, and also discuss some other things about TNG, process, and Gene Roddenberry. The episode comes in at just over 28 minutes. I hope you will enjoy it. Also, please remember to email me any questions you might have for my upcoming question and answer podcast. Thank you very much. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. I'm extraordinarily pleased to have back John Champion. John is one half of the podcast partnership of the greatest podcast ever in the history of the world. If you are a Star Trek fan, aficionado, newcomer, newbie, know nothing about it, this is the he has the podcast for you. He and his partner Ken Ray at missionlogpodcast.com, where they talk about all things Star Trek. So John, thank you very much for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you, man. I'm going to have your introduction bronzed and dipped in gold and hung on the wall. It's very kind of you.
Please pass it along to Rod.
I will, most definitely.
The reason I had asked if you could take some time to visit for this podcast was that you all are into the Next Generation series and you have completed season 1 of TNG. So I thought it might be time to maybe wrap up some of the issues, concepts, missions, morals, and meanings that you guys discussed throughout season 1. So with that, If I could jump right into it. Obviously, we have two very different captains. We had James T. Kirk, and now we have Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Right.
And their leadership styles are different. So, kind of from where you sit, what do you see as some of the differences or key differences in leadership style?
I think the single biggest thing is that Kirk, and here's the thing, you have to determine if it's the character or if it is the writing for the character, because the writing is going to be one thing, and then the portrayal of the character is going to be something else, usually. The actor has some influence on how that character comes across on screen. And I feel like with Kirk, a lot of what was written was very action-oriented. And you would get to the end of the third act, and it was the make or break, the do or die moment, and Kirk had to do something to save the world, right? And with Picard, we start out from the beginning being told that his first in command will not let the captain beam down anywhere. He will not let him get in the line of fire. He will not do anything that would jeopardize the captain's life or ability to command on that ship. Now, I think there's also a writing thing going on here where Next Generation takes its time unfolding a story, and you don't always end up with that end of the third act, make or break, do or die moment. So Picard is usually the one who says, don't take out your phaser, Mr. Worf. Don't raise shields. We don't want to look intimidating or threatening or defensive in any way. And then he is given the luxury of being able to think about and plot out how one should respond to the situation. Now, sometimes he can't, and sometimes he doesn't know the right answer. We just talked about Time Squared, which was not one of my favorite episodes, but Ken really found something in that one. But it's one of those rare episodes where Picard just absolutely does not know what to do. He does not know what the right answer is, because he's confronted with himself from a few hours in the future, and whatever he himself did a few hours in the future was wrong. Right. And ended in the destruction of the Enterprise. So this is a tough thing to be able to grapple with, just to be able to even glimpse a part of the path that you're down, and then not have the power or control to be able to change it, or even know what the right pathway is to avoid destruction. So to me, that's the biggest thing. Picard is more thoughtful. He is less action-oriented. He is good about bringing in every idea. There's a wonderful scene. Well, it has played out a couple of different ways a couple of times, but there's a wonderful scene in the episode that we did very recently with Sarjenka, Pen Pals, where the Enterprise is in a position to prevent a planet from destroying itself and therefore the people on that planet. And Data has been in contact with a child on that planet. And my favorite scene, even if it's a little heavy-handed, even if it's a little on the nose, is the crew sitting in Picard's quarters. So you got Picard, you got Riker, you've got Worf, you've got Pulaski, debating what they are to do, debating whether or not they should reach out a hand to help, and discussing whether or not they've come too far, whether or not this is about the individual or about their directive from Starfleet, the Prime Directive. So it's moments like that that I really like, because you really get to see Picard as the thinker. Now, with that said, Picard and Kirk, I think, are both... they're driven by a high moral sense. They're driven by a profound sense and respect for grappling with ideas of morality, ethics, and right or wrong. It's just Picard gets to take a breath every now and then, whereas Kirk didn't always get to do that.
I guess my observation is that Picard is more collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
Will take more opinions. Certainly Kirk took Bones and Spock's opinion, but that's really where it ended, if he took their opinions. And your point about the writing, I find that very interesting, because I would have expressed it the following. It's really the difference in leadership in the 60s and leadership in the 80s, and even focusing more the leadership style of the military from the 60s was still being influenced by World War II. Yet by the 80s, I think the Vietnam experience had crept into some leadership styles and perhaps allowing for more collaborative leadership. My father's generation, it was very much command and control, and you would see a captain off a ship on a landing crew. But by the 80s, maybe even the military had changed. So all very interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I think that's great insight into what makes those shows so different. Yeah.
If I could next turn to a different point, and you guys really helped me to understand something, or at least look at something in a new light, and that is the character of Tasha Yar, as played by Denise Crosby. I will have to share that I absolutely hated this character. I hated her from the first show. I hated her all the way through. I was thrilled when she died and left the show. But you guys actually explained it in a little bit broader terms and made clear that it doesn't really matter how good an actor you are constrained by the writing you receive, the lines you receive, the role you play, and that the writing for Yar may have left her in the position where someone like me didn't fully appreciate her. I would draw the analogy to Nigel Bruce's character as Dr. Watson in the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes from Universal movies in the 30s and 40s, where I detested that version of Watson. Yet, when I listened to the commentary, they pointed out he did as well as he could with the lines and material he was given.
Yeah.
And you guys really made that clear that this was not a Denise Crosby problem. This was really the character was written in a way that she was constrained in the way she could bring it to life. How did you deal with that?
You know, it's funny. There's the old adage that there are no small roles, only small actors. The idea that no matter what you're handed, you can make gold out of that. And it's a good thought to go into a production like that, to think that even if I feel like I have the fewest lines, the least important role, etc., that I can actually make something out of it. And that doesn't always play out in exactly that way. I have no doubt that Denise Crosby is a good actor. And I have no doubt that Denise Crosby is a good and smart person. And it's funny that she and Marina Sirtis got along and get along very well. but their approaches are very different. Marina, we have an upcoming interview with her on Mission Log. Marina's attitude is, you know what? I'm an actor. I got on a show. My job is to stay on the show. And if I'm given one line in an episode or 100 lines in an episode, if it's about me or if it's not about me, I'm an actor and I have a job. I'm on a show. I'm going to stick with it. Now, Denise, on the other hand, and I feel sympathy for this, from having watched the show now in order, first season, and picking apart the way that we do on Mission Log, you can get to a certain level of frustration to see that, well, maybe my character isn't being consistent from week to week. Maybe my character is doing things that I don't agree with, or maybe my character is being given short shrift where this would have been an opportunity for her or him. And at a certain point, enough was enough. And I don't know exactly who she lobbied and what she did to make her voice known if she was feeling that frustration, but it got to a point of saying, I need to get out of here because I'm not going anywhere with this. And I kind of get it. I kind of do. There are jobs that I'm sure that I've had and that you've had and that many people listening to this have had where you say, you know what, I'm just not getting any satisfaction out of this, and I could potentially be doing something else, even if that something else doesn't make me as much money, doesn't bring me maybe the accolades that I want, but it's personally more satisfying. And you see that from time to time with actors in high-profile positions where they just decide, you know what, I've had enough. I think that every actor, when they go into a job, they have great expectations that this is the one, and it'll be great, and it'll be smooth sailing from beginning to end. And then when it's not, you have to figure out who your allies are and how you go about making changes. And sometimes there are producers and writers who are receptive to that. And sometimes there aren't. And sometimes it may have to do with the pecking order on the show. We ran a great letter from Patrick Stewart to Gene Roddenberry, just this week, actually. Yes, yeah, and it shows this great recap of a lunch that Patrick and Gene had together where Patrick could kind of vent about what was going on with the Picard character and what he hoped would happen with it. Well, that's very lucky. It's the star of the show talking to the executive producer, creator of the show. And you can see some of the points that Patrick Stewart makes filter down into the show later on. I don't know if Denise ever had that opportunity. Maybe she did, but maybe it wasn't with the right people. Or maybe she did, but it didn't get followed up upon because there were other fish to fry. You know, it's so hard to say, and in hindsight, I'm sure that she could say many, many different things about how she could have, would have, should have. But you know, you and I are the same in that we watch it and we think, wow, they're not doing what they could with this character. So how much of that can an actor take? And the question or the answer for her was one season. But it's delightful to see her waving in the background at the end of that one episode, that it's like, hey, I had fun. You know? Even if we have to end it, I had fun.
Well, since we're not on missionlogpodcast.com, can you give us perhaps a spoiler alert that perhaps there's an episode in the future that perhaps she comes back and really broadens and fulfills some of the things that she may have hoped the role would be?
You know, that would be really interesting. Yes. You were talking about the great episode, Yesterday's Enterprise. And this is one of the things that I think is important for an actor, but it's also important for anybody in any job, is that, you know, you can't burn bridges in any way, shape, or form. You don't know how small that community is, and you don't know how often the word gets out about what you may have done or said that could really alter your future. By all indication, Denise left on good terms and was able to come back on good terms, and come back a few times. But specifically in that character of Tasha Yar, boy, do they make a great use out of that. I can't wait until we get to that episode. It really is one of those hallmark moments of Star Trek.
And it's truly one of my favorite episodes of TNG.
Yeah.
Now if we could turn to Data, and we could probably do multiple episodes on Data, but I really
Oh,
want
yeah.
to focus on a couple of points. One, is he a sentient being or not? But the other thing is the relationship of Data and Dr. Pulaski, because you guys really opened my eyes to an undercurrent from Dr. Pulaski. I don't want to say hate, that's too strong a word, but certainly not positive vibes towards Data from Dr. Pulaski. And she, as an actor and a character, I always loved. Loved her in the original series, and I loved her as Dr. Pulaski. But the more I went back and watched those episodes from the season where she was the ship's surgeon, medical officer, you really saw that undercurrent of some discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about Data. Here's the thing. I think that if I were confronted with someone like Data, I would almost have Pulaski's attitude toward him, and not to justify that she's kind of abrasive with him. That's one thing, but she is scientifically curious about Data. Now it comes across in kind of this harsh way, and she's kind of rankled by him, and she's kind of written as the female Dr. McCoy, and that's all well and good. But there's something at the heart of it that I really understand, which is questioning how you are supposed to interact with technology. A couple of episodes ago, when we introduced the character Ensign Sonia Gomez, it was in Q Who, where we introduced the Borg, but we introduced this other character. And the show opens with her being friendly to the replicator, saying please and thank you. And Geordi says, what are you doing? That's a machine. And she says, yeah, but I feel like we kind of lose a part of ourselves if we're not friendly, even to the things that we don't necessarily know. Is the ship computer sentient or not? It is intelligent, so maybe the onus is on us to decide that we'll be friendly and respectful of the intelligences, manufactured or not, that are around us. And I kind of think that maybe, I don't know if you have an iPhone, but on my iPhone, that's one of the things with Siri is everybody got Siri, and you can just sort of throw a question at Siri, like, how do I get from here to there? How do I get from home to work? And Siri will come back with an answer. But you find yourself saying thank you, and you find yourself saying please, and you find yourself saying, Siri, hey, or hey Siri, to activate it, rather than just do this. And in a weird way, it does personalize the technology. It personifies the technology in just a very strange but very subtle way. And I think if you and I were faced with a being like Data coming into the room, the curiosity and maybe the uneasiness at first would maybe cause a little friction. I'm sure you've heard about this idea of uncanny valley, that you can create, say, an animation or an android, a 3D representation of a human being that's a little too close, and people get weirded out by that. You can look at C-3PO, and C-3PO is a guy in a suit, or even if you believe that C-3PO was to be a real thing, it is a collection of mechanics and gears under a gold armor, right? But when you take robotics that look and behave almost exactly like human beings, people want to leave the room because it's very difficult to deal with. It's very, very strange. And I think Dr. Pulaski is feeling a little bit of that. It's almost maybe a little unfair to ask her to just accept Data because Data is Data and he's here and we all love Data, so you have to as well. There has to be a little bit of a warming up period and figuring out who and what he is.
But I would have to say what I drew from there was perhaps we lose our humanity if we act less human.
We do, yeah, we do absolutely. If you heard the old term, a person who is nice to you but is not nice to the waiter is not a nice person. The idea is that people kind of turn it on and turn it off, but their true colors may show in a situation where they're not maybe they're not guarded, or they're just not thinking about how they come across, and yeah, we risk something of that, of being less human and less than polite, certainly, when we start to let the technology do the work for us. People do that on Twitter and Facebook all the time. They'll let loose with horrendous vitriol that you would never experience in real life when you actually are faced with somebody in the same room, and you have to treat them as a human being. So it never hurts, even when faced with technology, to be a little kinder.
If I could turn to one thing that I thought about a lot before you guys got to the TNG series, and that's the character of Wesley Crusher. I was one who, during the series, was not a fan.
Yeah, me too.
But when I went back and watched, as you guys are doing, I watched the 7 seasons straight through, I began to see a different picture of Wesley Crusher, and my picture was the following. What do you do when you're a teenager going through all the teenage angst that all of us go through, yet you are the smartest person in the room? How can you make use of the talents and skills you have when your hormones are raging? If we think back to the original series, we had Dr. Daystrom, who created this great computer in his early 20s, and then perhaps wasn't as successful the rest of his life. But here we have a teenager, 16, 17, 18, I'm not quite sure where, but he's thrown into an adult world, and I began to see Wesley in a much different light, and I want to say much more favorable, but I would say I was certainly much more sympathetic to him and the struggles, and that really was a character that would resonate with a lot of people, perhaps younger than me.
I think the short answer to your question is you treat him like a teenager. And by saying that, I mean that you have to treat him like a human being who is a teenager, who's going through these things, and being a genius or being a part of the crew is almost secondary to that. Where they fell into a trap with Wesley is there were too many incidences where he was the guy with the answer who saved the ship. Or, he was the special one who could do something that nobody else could do. And then when you hit those moments where there's a real opportunity to have him bond with Picard, to have him, lose his mother, not that she died, but lose his mother to another job assignment, and then have to make friends, and then have to find his way in this world of adults, to fall in love, and have that first little bit of teenage romance there. The problem is when we hit those moments, they're so short and they're so contrived, and they're written like an adult writing a role or writing a moment for an alien, for a genius who is a small adult on the crew of the Enterprise, instead of just writing it realistically for a boy who is a teenage boy first on the ship, and then gets to experience all that. And that stuff happens over time. Just to praise Will a little bit, I'm sure that everybody who saw Next Generation, who had seen Stand By Me, which is a phenomenal movie, and he's so good in it, and he's probably like 11 years old or something. He's just a little kid. But he runs the emotional gamut. And you see over the course of these few days where the movie takes place, you see him grow up gradually. And it's not that he suddenly becomes a man, but just something in him changes after that experience. And I feel like with Star Trek, sometimes, and with some writers, and particularly with Wesley, they were looking for just the moment that they could write it and wrap it up and be done. And that was unfair. And part of it was just the reality of the way that TV was written at the time, because it would be very different if you were writing for that character now. But Wesley got the short end of the stick, and I wish it hadn't been that way, because I could have been one of the great characters off of that show. He also gets to redeem himself a little not unlike Tasha Yar. But where we are right now in season one, and then the first half coming up toward the end of season two, it's a bit rocky, and I understand why people didn't like him. People unfairly took it out on Will, and people unfairly said the character is horrible. But it wasn't always that. It was sometimes just the restriction of the way he was written, and what you could get away with and what you could not. So.
Now let's turn to something completely different. Last time I interviewed you, you were wearing a Man from U.N.C.L.E. hat. You've been to some sort of conference or reunion.
Yes.
Turns out you love that show, and I love that show, and we're both thrilled that the
yes.
coming out this summer. Have you seen any previews or have any insights you can share with us about that event?
I have watched that trailer about 50 times since it came out. Okay, all right. Last September, I went to the 50th anniversary convention here in LA. It was a one-time only thing. It'll never happen again. It was limited to about 100 people, and it was great. There were props, there were costumes, there were posters, there were guest stars and directors from the show. It was amazing. And that really sparked my interest again in seeing the trailer. And flash forward a few months, and then the trailer comes out, and I know that there are a lot of U.N.C.L.E. fans who are uneasy about this reinvention, reboot, whatever word you want to slap in front of it. But I tell you what, seeing Henry Cavill as Napoleon Solo, I get the same feeling I did watching Carl Urban play Dr. McCoy, where regardless of the movie, you can love or hate the J.J. Abrams movies, but Carl Urban is doing something right as Dr. McCoy. And it's not an imitation, it's just like he's channeling DeForest Kelley. He's embodying that character. And Henry Cavill, if you watch him and listen to him in that trailer, sometimes I'm just like, wow, that he is so dead on with Napoleon Solo that I know. And here's the thing, U.N.C.L.E. is in a very lucky position compared to Star Trek. Star Trek has a lot of baggage. You've got 50 years of TV shows and movies and cartoons and books and a rabid fan base that's a very big fan base. Man for U.N.C.L.E. kind of went away for a while. And you've got the original series. You got some books. Some are good, some are not so good. You got some of the Gold Key comics. Some are good, some are not so good. You had one reunion movie, which is almost unwatchable. So it's their game to lose. They get to reintroduce this great idea to a new audience, and I love that they said it in 1963, and I love that it's an origin story for Ilya and Napoleon, because we never got that before. So more power to them. I think that's absolutely the way to go, and I will be there midnight opening night to watch that movie and probably sit in the theater all day the next day. Yeah, you must have seen the trailer as well by now, and yeah, are we on the same page, or am I crazy?
We're absolutely on the same page.
Okay, cool. And Ilya had the gun. You got to see the gun in the trailer. Yeah, I just the costumes. It looks right. It looks right to me.
Well, I'll look forward to that almost as much as you are. Unfortunately, we're at the end, but if people wanted to pick up with the podcast, where would they go?
Sure. Missionlogpodcast.com is the hub for everything that we do. Discover documents, podcast episodes, interviews, and supplemental episodes, and then a link to all of our social media. And we have a very active listener feedback going on there, and on Facebook, and on Twitter. So please join us.
John, once again, thanks for taking the time to visit with me. It's been way too much fun, and I know you're very busy, so I will sign off. And until next time.
My pleasure, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Hello again. This is Tom Fox, and I would like to ask you to please send in any questions for my upcoming mailbag podcast. And also, if you could go to iTunes, if you're listening to this, and indicate that you like this episode and the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.